Joining us now is Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland. He was a member of the January 6th committee and will be the ranking member on the Oversight Committee should the 118th Congress ever get to work. Congressman, thank you for joining us tonight. I wonder how you look upon the events that have unfolded in the course of the last few days and the fact that here we sit on January 6, 2023.
Well, it's hard for me not to view it in the context of what happened 2 years ago today. Kevin McCarthy, who originally, cried about what was taking place, and rightfully so, attacking Donald Trump, quickly withdrew his criticism and then pandered to the pro-insurrectionist part of the Republican Party and helped to whitewash and cover up what had taken place. And that was a signal to the extremist elements within the Republican Party that there was nothing that Kevin McCarthy wouldn't do in order to achieve power within the GOP caucus. And so he has moved steadily to the right, and he has capitulated at every turn to these extremist elements within the GOP. And that's what makes this such a scary moment in terms of the precipice of the 118th Congress, because there are a lot of things where he has just completely given the keys of power away to the most fanatical parts of his caucus and, essentially giving a one-member veto to the most extreme members of the caucus means that we are going to have a series of drag-down battles on things like the debt limit, shutting down the government, and so on. But to my mind, this is all part of the implosion of the Republican Party as they continue to cater to these fanatical forces that we saw on full display 2 years ago tonight.
There's a fox in the henhouse quality to all of this. It was one thing to have election deniers in Congress. Now we're talking about election deniers chairing committees or subcommittees, really at the upper echelons of power in Congress. I mean, what are the implications for the 2024 presidential election to have, as you point out, election deniers one step away from ousting the Speaker of the House? Can they fool around with election certification come 2024? I mean, what practically are the implications of the concessions that Kevin McCarthy has made to this group of people?
Well, look, they've shown on January 6, 2021 and January 6, 2023, there's nothing that they won't do. They are a rule or ruin faction. And the way that the radical Republicans, who are obviously a very different breed than these Republicans, dealt with it after the Civil War was they built into the Constitution in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment a statement that if you swear an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and you betray the oath by engaging in insurrection or rebellion, you can never hold office again. And the history of that provision is fascinating because the Republicans wanted to go further and just disenfranchise anybody who participated in the Confederacy. And when it got over to the Senate said, well, that goes too far. Let's just focus on the most hardcore element, those people who had sworn an oath to the Constitution but violated it. And we'll make sure they can still vote, but they can never serve in office again. And so I think that's a provision that the country has got to be taking seriously in the days ahead, as the January 6th committee urged in our final recommendations.
When you talk about the January 6th committee, I mean, they have shown, this group of folks, these incoming Republicans who are taking the majority, have shown every indication and inclination that they want to have their own kind of bizarro version of the January 6th committee, an investigation to weaponize the federal government. They seem to have the funding locked down for that. They have their sights set on people who worked on the committee, who may have been sources to the committee. How concerned are you about the security of those who, in many ways, risked their careers, if not their lives, testifying against the former president and his allies who tried to steal the election?
Well, the first point about that, Alex, is that they will not revisit the findings of the January 6th committee because the people that they would call as witnesses, i.e. the members of the Trump administration, the Trump White House, the Trump family, all testified, and they all told the same story, which was Donald Trump simply refused to take no for an answer from the American people and set about to overturn a presidential election all the way to the point of inciting a violent mob to storm the Congress of the United States and attack attack his own vice president. So they're not going down that road. But you're right that they will try to cook something up about the Department of Justice and already their completely failed allegations about Russiagate, which they think people are listening to, but they're not. Everybody understands that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are aligned as an axis of autocratic and plutocratic power on earth, and they're all trying to overthrow democracy. So if that's what they want to do, if they want to have that conversation, great, because we'd love to talk about Vladimir Putin's filthy imperialist invasion of Ukraine, his attack on democracy in Ukraine, and indeed his attack on democracy all over the world as he tries to undermine democratic parties, democratic movements, and democratic constitutions.
Congressman Raskin, I think of you as the poet laureate of the House. And as such, I wonder if you could put into context this moment as compared to Election Day 2022, when Democrats were feeling very good about the American public offering a fairly resounding vote in favor of democracy and staving off this slide that seemed at one point inexorable towards anti-democratic forces, if not outright autocracy. Couple that with the events of the last 4 days, where the Republican would-be Speaker of the House is catering to a radical fringe that seems intent indeed on cementing anti-democratic forces inside the lower chamber.
Well, look, the Democrats, we have a tough job because we've got to do two things. One is we have to refute and debunk all of the lies, the disinformation, the propaganda, the conspiracy theories, the scandals du jour, and honor the facts. And so we have to be a truth squad for America. But then even more importantly, we have to keep America moving forward. We've got to stay on track in terms of investment in infrastructure, in lowering health care and prescription drug costs. We've got to be meeting the needs of the American people. But the great news is that the Democratic Party post-Donald Trump is a very different party than before Donald Trump. We are battle-hardened. We are veterans of all of their propaganda and disinformation and nonsense. We know how to take them on. And the people in the Democratic caucus who've hung together 212-0, ballot after ballot, for Hakeem Jeffries, from our most conservative elements to our most progressive elements, the people who've hung together, we are blood brothers and sisters in this struggle to defend American democracy and American freedom. And we are backed by the vast majority of the American people all over the country. And we know that what we're up against is a minority party, a shrinking minority party, increasingly shrill, increasingly cultish in their ways, but they do have control over certain anti-democratic practices like voter suppression, and they manipulate the Electoral College, and they use gerrymandering to their advantage, and so on. So it's a race between the democratic will of the vast majority of the people and these anti-democratic practices that are just barely keeping the GOP alive today.
Well, I think a lot of people watch what is happening, and you have the enthusiasm and the support and the admiration of a lot of parts of the country, which I still believe is a majority of America. Congressman Jamie Raskin, once more into the breach, Democrat from Maryland and former member of the January 6th committee. Thank you for making time tonight, especially before the House has to go vote again at the top of the hour. May this end soon. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.